Hello, I'm Dr. Salt, and we have a very important uh, expose, you might say, on the book of Jasher. Now, the book of Jasher is mentioned in the Bible, but simply because something is mentioned in the Bible, that does not mean that it should be part of the canon. Contrary to what many people think and believe, the book of Jasher, despite the fact that it's referenced in the Bible, as I said in Joshua 10 and 13 and in 2 Samuel 1 and 18, is not included in the biblical canon, and for several key reasons. The exclusions and non-canonical status of Jasher can be understood through historical, theological, and we have to look at textual considerations. And I want to point out some reasons why the book of Jasher has been excluded from the canon. And number one, it lacks divine inspiration. You know, the Bible tells us that all scripture, not some, but all scripture is given by the inspiration of God and is profitable for doctrine. And that's problematic. Anyone using the book of Jasher in their liturgical services shouldn't be using it because it is not of divine inspiration. And if they use it, they should use it given a caveat explaining why they are using it. And if they're using it, it can only be used for maybe historical or literary value if it is used. What are the primary criteria that we have to consider for a book to be considered canonical is its perceived divine inspiration. You see, the early church and the Jewish authorities evaluated the biblical text based on whether they were believed to be directly inspired by God or written by the prophets or the apostles, and if what was written aligned with the rest of the scripture. And that's what's problematic with the book of Jasher. It doesn't. And as it exists today, it does not claim divine inspiration or contain prophecies which set it apart from canonical texts like the books of the prophets that we recognize, such as Ezekiel, Daniel, Jeremiah, Isaiah, and the like, as you know, even the minor prophets. Now, when we say minor prophets, we are not demeaning or saying anything incorrect. It is a well-established principle in biblical theology and in the way that the books are taught and the way that the books are referred to. They are divided into categories, and so they are minor. The minor prophets just simply mean, what I'm trying to say is that the minor prophets just simply mean that they did not write as much as the major prophets. And you'll notice that Isaiah, Jeremiah, Lamentation, Ezekiel, and Daniel, their writings are rather voluminous. They wrote quite a bit. Their writings are kind of thick. Whereas when we get into the 12 minor prophets, and remember, we say minor only in terms of the volume in which they wrote under the inspiration of God. We're not suggesting that what Malachi or Joel or Amos had to say was anything not important or less important than Ezekiel, Daniel, Jeremiah, or Isaiah. So that's why we say minor prophets. It's an academic way of identifying the prophets relative to the volume in which they wrote. Now, the current versions of the book of Jasher are regarded as more of a historical or a moral work rather than a divinely inspired text. It's true, theologians and Bible scholars generally, they view Jasher as a form of midrash, and midrash refers to the Jewish commentaries and the Talmud, the Jewish commentaries and Talmud, a lot of writings that fall in the intertestamentary period between Malachi and Christ. But when we look at the book of Jasher, it's more of focusing on legend or folk history rather than a direct revelation from God. And that is critical and that is serious. Number two, there are questions concerning Jasher about the uncertainty about its authenticity. Did God really inspire this book? And the answer is no. Although the book of Jasher is mentioned in the Bible, and the exact text being referenced is unclear. It just mentions, is it not written in the book of Jasher? Okay, the versions of the book of Jasher available today are generally considered later compilations or forgeries. And most scholars and experts agree that that the book of Jasher that we have today does not represent the original text that's cited in the Bible. You know, for example, the most well-known version of Jasher, often associated with the medieval Hebrew manuscript, it dates back to the 17th century. And this version is widely believed by Bible students and scholars alike. It's widely believed to be a pseudo-pigraphical text. That is a fake text, meaning that somebody, whoever it is that wrote the book of Jasher, they made a lot of false claims, and even the authorship or origins of this book is questionable. And so these are serious considerations with the book of Jasher. And given this kind of uncertainty about the authenticity of the surviving texts of Jasher, early Jewish and Christian authorities were very reluctant to include it in the canon. So it's not in the canon. It's not in the 39 books of the Old Testament in terms of the Protestant books, and it's not in the 22 books of the Hebrew Bible, but the 22 books of the Hebrew Bible and 39 books of the Protestant Bible are really the same books. We just count the books different. And also it's important to point out that Jesus did not teach from the book of Jasher, neither the book of Enoch, which is another book, along with many other pseudo-pigraphical books that have become very popular in modern times. I think people's imaginations are captured by the idea or the notion that they have their hands on something that's been hidden. But the books, scholars and Bible students have known about these books for the longest. So it's not like you're getting your hands on something that's some kind of secret, mystical information. Many of these books that are coming to the forefront today, many of these books are forgeries and were not written by the people whom they claim the book was written by. And so this lack of reliable evidence that the current book of Jasher is the same as the ancient one mentioned in the scripture, sure, it's fueled a lot of skepticism about its value as a canonical text, but it's not. And when we look at it, number three, we have considerable historical and theological inconsistencies that are found in the book of Jasher. And you say, well, what are they? Well, I'm not going to go into that kind of detail. I would suggest if you're interested in it, that read it yourself. You can find it online. You can order it. It's easy to get a copy of it. What of the Book of Jasher. But remember, it's not the original Book of Jasher. And when we look at the Book of Jasher and look at the theological consistency with the scriptures that we recognize as canonical scriptures, it's a critical requirement for a book to be included in the Bible if the book is canonical, if the book is divinely inspired. And it's unfortunate that we can't say that about the Book of Jasher. The Book of Jasher did not come from God. The Book of Jasher comes from man. And only someone who is theologically naive and to a certain degree ignorant would even embrace the book, because they would first do due diligence and do some research. And it's so easy to research this book and to gain the knowledge and awareness that the book is a forgery, and it should not be used as a book of canonicity and for doctrinal purposes. Now, many versions of the Bible of the Book of Jasher contain historical accounts and moral teachings or theological views that either contradict or add extraneous material to the biblical narrative. You know, that's what's even laughable about the Book of Enoch. The Book of Enoch makes outrageous claims about giants being 3,000 ells tall, and someone converted what the measurement of an elf is, and concluded that the giants would have had to, according to the Book of Enoch, the giants would be as tall as the Empire State Building. 3,000 ells. They would be as tall as the Empire State Building. And we're supposed to believe that some beings as tall as the Empire State Building. I don't know if you've ever been to New York, but I have. And the Empire State Building is up there. And so it's huge. It's humongous. And we're supposed to believe that a being of this size had sex with the little 5 foot 5'1", 5'2", 4'9", I don't know, woman of ancient times. Is absolutely laughable. It's ridiculous. And because of the outrageous and outlandish claims that are made in many of these so-called lost books, these pseudo-epigraphical books, this is why these books were rejected. And if you're going to read them, you need to read them being well informed of the fact that the books are not divinely inspired. And this has been a major reason for the Book of Jasher being excluded. For instance, some passages in Jasher present expanded and embellished versions of biblical stories. But these editions are not regarded as authoritative. The Book of Enoch does that. The Book of Enoch expands on the book of Genesis and contradicts it, and is easy to see once you read it that there's no way that God inspired the Book of Enoch or this modern day book of Jasher. You see, the early church councils and Jewish authorities, such as the Sanhedrin and later Christian scholars, they established a firm canon of scripture based on strict criteria for consistency, historical authenticity, and alignment with core beliefs. Jasher deviates from the accepted scriptural traditions, made it incompatible with the standard canon of our 66 books. In other words, the Book of Jasher had to be rejected because it flies in the face of so much of the doctrines and teachings of the Bible. Now, references to the book of Joshua, as we mentioned, does not mean that we give it canonicity credentials. The reference to the book of Jasher in Joshua 10 verse 13 and 2 Samuel chapter 1 verse 18, these are just some vague and references and do not provide enough information for us to establish its contents or its purpose candidly or clearly. To be absolutely, in all due respect to those who read from the book of Jasher, uh, they they are embracing that book out of ignorance, and I think some people have embraced it because they're egotistical and high-minded, and they want to project themselves as though they are more knowledgeable. You know, it's kind of, I call it the Yogi Bear syndrome. You know, Yogi Bear was smarter than the average bear, and so these individuals have that Yogi Bear syndrome, and they want to just start embracing the Gospel of Thomas, the book of Enoch, and the book of Maccabees, and the book of Ecclesiasticus, and all of these books. They just reach out and start pulling these books in, and really it's really they do it because of biblical illiteracy, and that's sad, and it's particularly sad when they can come across as a credible Bible scholar when in actuality nothing could be further from the truth. Uh, it is possible that the term Book of Jasher just simply refers to a collection of historic songs or records of righteous deeds rather than a single inspired text. You know, these references likely point to a work that is now lost, and I think most scholars agree. If there was a book of Jasher, it's lost. It's gone, never to be seen again, and that's only and probably because God never intended it to be used for purposes of instructions in righteousness or included in our or included in our present day canon. So Jasher may not even represent well, I shouldn't say it may not, but I'm from my research and from what I've seen, Jasher should not even be included, because I do not believe that this present book of Jasher that's going around and that's available represent the same text as the original and real book of Jasher. I think that people have given it that kind of credibility, but I think when you read it, you'll see that it does not deserve that, because it's clear with all of the contradictions that it does not belong in the Bible. And simply pointing out that even in our Bible, that here and there may be some contradictions in some of the books, but those were scribal errors that were made, and that's understandable. Those were man-made errors here and there in the Old Testament. But when it comes to the book of Joshua, this ambiguity around what the original book of Jasher contained, it makes it difficult to argue for its inclusion in the canon. It makes it very difficult, as its content, its purpose, its origin are not sufficiently clear or consistent with biblical standards. And then the problem that we have with the book of Jasher, I'll say number 5, is that the pseudopigrapha an apocryphal text. So when we look at these fake texts and these phony texts that embellish, and it almost sounds like a fable or something. The author, whoever wrote it, it seems that they're trying so hard to convince the reader that it is inspired of God that they take certain liberties that make it sound fabulistic. And you know, I'm often reminded of what Peter said in his epistle. Peter said, "We have not followed cunningly devised fables." And I think that's what's going on in this modern version of the Book of Jasher, claiming to be the book referred to in Joshua and in Samuel. The Book of Jasher is considered part of the body of texts known as the pseudo, which includes works written by unknown authors, and it is falsely attributed to an author. We don't even know who wrote the book of. We don't know who wrote this book. Many such works like this, as I've mentioned, the Book of Enoch and the Book of Jubilees, these books, Bel and the Dragon, these books are excluded from the Bible for similar reasons. They were written much later than the biblical canon, and the canon was closed when some of these books were written, and they often include legends, speculations, and expansions on the biblical narrative that were not consistent with accepted scripture. And this should be of great concern to anyone who takes divinely inspired scripture, as our Bible is, that take it seriously. These pseudo-pictographical books, while sometimes they provide historical or cultural insights, they were not considered authoritative for doctrinal purposes or practiced in either Judaism or in Christianity. The Book of Jasher, it falls into this category, as the surviving versions are much later and differ significantly from the canonical scriptures in terms of their style, their content, and message. Now, in conclusion, as we wrap this up on this pseudo-pictographical text called the Book of Jasher, it's excluded from the biblical canon due to its lack of clear divine inspiration. The Book of Jasher, by its very content, is not divinely inspired. And many scholars have uncertainty about the authenticity of the book. Not only the authenticity of the book, they question the historical and theological inconsistencies that are found in the book, and its status as a pseudo-pictographical work. While it is referenced in the Bible, the current versions, I'm talking about the current versions, if the Book of Jasher were available today, the one that's being referenced in Joshua and Samuel, if that book was available today, I can assure you 100% that it would not read the way this modern ripoff and forgery reads. It would not. So we need to be cautious about the Book of Jasher. And if somebody started reading out of the Book of Jasher in a church service, they need to read it, but they need to read it with a caveat, maybe saying, hey, this book is not canonical, but I'm reading it for historical purposes, for cultural purposes, to bring out a point or something. That needs to be said, because scripture must come from the inspiration of God. And so the Book of Jasher, this modern day version, is not considered reliable or an authoritative text. And as a result, it has not been accepted as part of our canon. The Jews have rejected it, and uh, just about all Christian authorities and traditions have rejected it. And I suggest you reject it too. If someone's reading it, you can listen, but do not embrace the book of Jasher as being of canonical content. It is not. So I hope that you have enjoyed this video in which we have been going over the book of Jasher and pointing out why Christians today should reject the book of Jasher as it is in its modern form, because it is a forgery. It is not the original text as mentioned in Joshua and in the book of Samuel. God bless you. I'm Dr. Salt, and hit that subscribe button and leave a comment, and hit that like button so that you'll get first notification when we release another video. God bless you. Take care of yourself.